poem in the book that does feel like it's really interested in that is Smear the Queer.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting that you talked about creating space, because the poem ends in this kind of pile up. The boys are kind of pile up on one another,
Mm-hmm.
and it opens a space for them to be in community.
Mm-hmm.
But it seems like they have to do it under the cover of violence
mm-hmm.
in many ways.
Well, that's the thing, like, to me, that, like, you know, it just occurred to me one day that was the name of a game that we played. And then I was sort of thinking my own experience of being an athlete, and being a coach and being a, you know, a young man in that sort of world, was that there are all of these mechanisms that, I don't know which is first, but, you know, brutal homophobia, brutal misogyny, all of these things that are sort of put in place, it seems, partly because there's this profound tenderness that is terrifying, you know, or something like that. And, you know, when I think of, like, these games, you know, like football, for instance, which I played in college, it's sort of what I think about a lot. I think that there were these incredible moments of tenderness, like deep, deep, deep tenderness. And there could be, it felt like the sort of structures of violence, or there was a kind of masquerade of violence that allowed that tenderness to happen. You know, I don't know exactly how to articulate it, but I think you're right. The tenderness in some instances in that poem, and my experience of being an athlete, the tenderness is sort of accommodated or made possible by these other sort of brutalities. And that's what the poem means to sort of question. And the thing that I want that poem to sort of imagine is that there are these spaces, you know, there are these spaces where where that tenderness among boys can sort of exist, in the poem. That's sort of what I'm trying to do. Like, I had an impulse to sort of make the critique sort of complete by coming back to something else, but I wanted to sort of imagine even my own experience where the boys in the poem they don't have to sort of snap out of it, but they get to sort of lay there with each other. Yeah.
You said that there are these moments of tenderness that are really terrifying. What is terrifying about tenderness?
Well, not terrifying to me.
Mm-hmm.
What's terrifying about tenderness? That's a great question. I don't know. But I know it is. I know the things that happen in the locker room. I know that, you know, men wearing towels, you know, straight men wearing towels, helping each other into the shower with a broken ankle, could be perceived or could be felt to be terrifying, you know. The kind of intimacy, I can think of just sitting around, this sort of proximity that I felt that we had, the sort of physical tenderness that you could have outside of a sort of this certain kind of structure could feel like terrifying for folks, for the participants, you know, like, whoa. And that's kind of what I mean, you know what I mean? So that's why those spaces, they have to be profound, like deeply regulated. Like, you know, there cannot be people who disrupt that space, you know.
There was a great interview with you in Interdisciplinary Literary Studies.
Oh, yeah.
Where you talked about the poem as a bodily thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Can you talk a little bit more about where the body is in your poem, where the body's located?
You know, I want the poem to really feel like, I want the reader to know that it's being conveyed in some way by a body that is dying, you know, that is like in transit. And I try to do that, and I sort of dramatize that in ways by saying, "Dear reader, like, are you with me?" and that kind of stuff. And I want that to be very much sort of present in the work, partly because it's true, and partly because I think it's a generosity of a reader to sort of hang with a poem ever. I feel like that's really generous. I also think the sentence, the long sentence, is a way of sort of thinking about the body. I do think about, in ways that feel sort of complicated and not fully articulated, that poems are, like everything about a poem is a kind of expression of a moment of the body. So the line is a kind of breath, and a sentence is an accumulation of breaths, so that the poem itself in some way, the form of the poem speaks to the fact of if it speaks to breathing, then it speaks to the fact that we won't breathe at some point, which is dramatic to me. That's interesting. And thinking about like the poem as a bodily thing, I'm interested in readings. I think poets, writers, people in their bodies are very interesting. I just think it's really interesting,
Yeah. Why is it important for you that the reader know the poem coming from a person with a body?
That's an awesome question. I mean, let's see if I can say this right. There are ways that we value dead things more than we value living things. And the Academy really maybe also validates that. And a book is often thought of as a more valuable thing than the person, who made the thing. And I don't think I believe that, I think, I think it's important that we know that we're more important than objects, I think that,
Yeah. I think the body can be kind of a tough thing because on one hand, I find myself sometimes as a woman just yearning to be free of it, to just, can I just be, can I just get out of the kind of surveillance that's on my body?
Yeah.
And there are ways that, because, people, the way we read bodies that invite brutality on them.
Right.
But in the same breath, trying to find a way that we can sacretize the body so that it is forbidden to be brutal to the body.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a tough thing to negotiate. I
It's
think.
a totally tough thing to negotiate, yeah. Because some of us have bodies that have been told in a way they're so absented that they're omnipresent in a certain kind of way, or like some of us are made to feel our bodies as facts more than other people, and other people, whose bodies are imagined in some context to be universal, and so it's not to be thought of. So I'm saying if you have a female-bodied person, or if you're brown or whatever, in certain contexts, not everywhere. It is, the fact of the body is like this, it can feel like it's a contestation already, and so I hear what you're saying. It's like, it would be nice for that not to feel that way.